In the last video, we covered what DBT is, where it came from, and why companies adopt it. Today we're going hands-on. By the end of this video, you'll have a real DBT project running, you'll have written your first model, and you'll have run your first automated test against real data. No prior DBT experience needed, just the concepts from the last video. This is exactly the kind of project you could realistically build in an afternoon, and reuse as the foundation for everything else you learn in this series. Let's get building. Before we write any code, let's cover what you actually need. First, a warehouse account. A free trial on Snowflake or BigQuery works fine, and if you'd rather not use the cloud at all, Duck running locally is a genuinely solid option for learning. Second, you need DBT itself installed, either DBT Core through Python's package manager, or a free DBT cloud account if you'd rather skip local setup entirely. And third, any code editor works, though VS Code with the official DBT extension makes reading and writing models noticeably easier, since it understands DBT's project structure out of the box, with syntax highlighting for both the SQL and the YAML configuration files you'll be working with throughout this video. You have two ways to actually run DBT, and it's worth understanding the difference before you pick one. DBT Core is free, open source, and runs entirely on your own machine, from the command line, with you managing your own scheduling. DBT Cloud is the managed, hosted version, with an in-browser interface, built-in scheduling, and continuous integration checks handled for you. The good news is that both use the exact same underlying project structure. Everything you learn today about models and tests works identically whether you're running DBT Core on your laptop or DBT Cloud in a browser. If you're just starting out, DBT Cloud's free developer plan is often the fastest way to get something running without wrestling with local Python environments. When you create a new DBT project, it generates a standard folder structure, and it's worth knowing what each piece is for before we start writing code. At the top level sits dbtproject.yml, the file that configures the whole project. The models folder is where almost all of your actual work lives, one SQL file per model. The seeds folder holds any static reference data you want to load in. Tests holds the checks we'll write later in this video. And snapshots holds the point-in-time captures we covered in the last video. Every DBT project you'll ever open follows this same basic shape, which is exactly why an experienced DBT developer can open a project they've never seen before and immediately know where to look for any piece of logic. Here's an actual dbtproject.yml file. It names your project, sets the profile it should connect through, and tells DBT exactly where to find each type of object, your models, your seeds, your tests. The models block at the bottom sets sensible defaults. In this example, every model inside the staging folder gets built as of you unless you specifically override it. This one file is really the control panel for your entire project. Your warehouse connection details live in a separate file called profiles.yml, kept outside your project folder on purpose, since it holds real credentials. This example connects to Snowflake, specifying the account, the role DBT should use, and which warehouse and schema to build into. Notice the password isn't typed in directly. It's pulled from an environment variable instead, which keeps real secrets out of your code entirely, and out of Git if you ever push this project to a repository. This same pattern, reading credentials from the environment rather than writing them into a file, is standard practice across almost all modern data tooling, not just DBT. Before writing our first real model, we declare a source. This small file tells DBT that a table called orders already exists in the raw schema, loaded there by an ingestion tool, not by DBT declaring it here. Rather than just hard-coding a table name inside a query, means DBT can track it as a real dependency, and later tell you exactly which models depend on it if that raw table ever changes. And here's a complete, real DBT model. It's just a select statement, saved as stageorders.sql, doing some light cleanup, standardizing the status column, and filtering out any order with a non-positive amount. The important detail is that source function call. Instead of hardcoding the raw table's name directly into the query, it reaches back to the source we declared a moment ago, which is exactly what lets dbt track this model's dependency correctly, and warn you later if you ever try to delete a source that another model still quietly depends on. There are really only two functions you need to understand to read almost any dbt project. Source, which we just used, points at raw data dbt didn't build itself. Ref points at another dbt model, and it's how one model builds cleanly on top of another. The rule that matters here is simple: never hardcode a table name directly inside a dbt model. Always use source or ref instead. That single habit is what lets dbt automatically construct the full dependency graph, and safely figure out the correct order to run everything in. With the model written, running it is one command: dbt run. dbt compiles the SQL behind the scenes, replacing that source call with the real table name, and executes it against your warehouse in the correct dependency order. This log output confirms exactly when model ran, took about a second, and finished successfully. At this point, stage orders is a real view sitting in your warehouse, and you can query it exactly like any other table, right alongside the raw tables it was built from. So what actually happened inside your warehouse? dbt generated real SQL, based on the model you wrote, and sent it to Snowflake to execute. dbt itself never touched a single row of data, exactly like we covered in the last video. A new view, staging.stageOrders, now genuinely exists, and you can query it in Snowsight or any BI tool exactly like any other object in your warehouse. And if you run dbt run again, it simply rebuilds cleanly, always reflecting whatever your model files currently say. Now let's add our first tests. This file attaches two built-in tests to the order ID column: unique and not null, plus a not null check on amount. No custom code required for any of this. dbt ships with these common checks built in. Attaching them here means order ID is guaranteed to be a real, non-duplicated identifier before anyone downstream ever builds a report on top of this model. Running dbt test executes all three checks and reports a clear pass or fail for each one. All three pass here, which means every single row in stage orders has a unique, non-null order ID, and a non-null amount. If any of these had failed, dbt would tell you exactly which rows violated the rule, which turns debugging a data quality issue into a 5-minute task instead of an afternoon of manual digging through spreadsheets and old queries trying to figure out where things went wrong. Look at everything you just did. You set up a real dbt project with the correct folder structure and a working warehouse connection. You declared a source and wrote your first model, using source to reference raw data exactly the way real production dbt projects are built. You ran dbt run and watched an actual view get created inside your warehouse from nothing but a SQL file. And you wrote and ran your first automated tests, confirming your data genuinely meets the rules you defined. That's your first working dbt project, built end to end. In the next video, we'll go further, chaining multiple models together with ref, building a staging to final layered pipeline, and introducing dbt's built-in documentation. If this helped, subscribe so you don't miss it, and try building on the project you just created before the next video. See you then.